Can everybody hear me? I am so honored to be here and to have the opportunity to speak with you today, because the subject of this conference and of this panel is so important, not just today, but really we are here talking about our collective future. And I would like for all of you to consider what will happen if women do not have equal representation in technology. What will happen? I put it to you that the stakes we are talking about today have to do with everything that the future will bring. Technology will shape education, business, environment, social care, everything. And if there are a majority of white men creating this technology, then our problems, our families' problems, will not be solved. So it is excruciatingly important for women to be present in this sector. But I want to tell you something about the reality of what you will face. Because I have no doubt that the women in this room will make it in technology. But what I do doubt is if you know exactly what you're getting into. I'm a journalist. My job is not PR. I don't want to sugarcoat reality for you. Ladies, it is a man's world in technology. And what that means is, when you show up ready and educated and motivated to start your career in technology, you are going to come up against things that are not talked about enough. There is, underneath the waterline, above the waterline, companies talk about being diverse. They have diversity officers. They talk about being inclusive and wanting women. But in reality, what happens is they find one woman, they give her a high position, and then women are checked off the list as done. That's called tokenism. There is a lot of tokenism in Silicon Valley, in Berlin, in London, in Hong Kong. One woman is enough. There's also bullying. There's also a huge gender pay gap. Even companies like Dell in America, which has a great track record for evening out the pay for men and women, they had to pay almost $3 million this May because the American government found out that they were underpaying men and black people in California and in Virginia. $3 million. And this is a company that has a dedication to keeping things fair. Even they slip up. What I'm telling you is that there is also bias in hiring. There's bias in promotion. Women are working beneath their credentials all over the tech industry. And once they get into the door, once women actually make it into a company, they get bullied, they get abused, and very often they do not get the help they need. So, that's reality. It's not sugar-coated. There really is. For every one woman in tech, there are 20 men. You are up against difficult odds. But the stakes are high, and we need you to succeed. Not just so that you will have a nice and fulfilling career, but because the world needs women in technology. Now, luckily, the pressure on technology from journalists, from NGOs, from activist groups, and from amazing men inside the tech sector and women, the pressure is mounting. And there is more and more awareness of the problem. Therefore, it is being slowly improved. But we are not at the tipping point yet. It is not my generation that's going to fix tech for women and for other minorities. It is yours. You are the people who are actually going to get in and revolutionize the tech industry. My job is to make sure that you actually make it there. And that is what we are going to be talking about with our panelists today. Their job is to give you practical advice and give you strategies to get in the door and to succeed when you get there. So please join me in welcoming Sarah Klatterbach, the Director of Engineering for Google. Alan Simonet, the Managing Director for 3M in East Europe. Brigitta Finander, Head of Research and Development in Poland and the Ukraine for Ericsson. And Emilia Burzyńska, the Chief Innovation Officer for CE for Procter & Gamble. And remember, as you're listening, if you have questions, post them to the application, and at the end of the session, I will try to ask as many of them as possible. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Please sit down. I would like us to start at the beginning, because these women in the audience, despite the odds, they are going to show up. They're going to show up in Silicon Valley. They're going to show up in Hong Kong and Berlin and London, and they're going to try to get their foot in the door. I would like for you to share your stories about how you got your start, what worked for you when you were beginning your career in technology. Sarah, if you could kick us off.
Sure, thank you for having me. So I actually grew up with a huge love of the beauty of mathematics, and I also loved design. And I actually started my career in design studying in undergrad. And I didn't discover my love of computers, of the internet, and programming until quite late in my undergraduate career. And so I ended up taking some programming classes, having an internship at a small software startup, and that's what got me in the door. And originally, I was hired during what was called the dot-com boom in Silicon Valley, and this was a time...
This was the 90s?
Yeah, late 90s. And literally anyone who could write code could get a job as an engineer in Silicon Valley at this time. And so I was able to start...
It was like Poland in the 90s.
Yes. And so I was able to get my start that way, but I realized pretty quickly that I needed to up-level my understanding of computer science theory, and so decided to go back to school while I was working and finished my degree in information science, my master's degree, and also took a series of data structures and algorithms courses to really round out my understanding. And so that, for me, would be my first advice, is make sure you know the fundamentals. It doesn't necessarily matter what you studied originally to get into the door, but make sure you have a solid understanding of systems design, of algorithms, of coding, because these are the things that you're going to need to survive and thrive as an engineer in Silicon Valley. Fast forward to now, I've worked at Apple, Yahoo, LinkedIn, and now I'm at Google. And one of the things I decided that for me was a blind spot, or maybe something I was lacking, was a global perspective. And so I decided last year to move here to EMEA. I'm now based in Zurich, working for Google, and that was something I really felt as a leader I needed to develop to be more inclusive, to develop products for the whole world, not just for other Americans.
So you hire. Do you also make hires for your teams?
I do, yes.
And what is it that you pay attention to when selecting candidates for your teams?
So again, I think it's really the fundamentals, but even beyond that, I'm also looking for people who have leadership skills, and this includes the ability to communicate well, the ability to have empathy and to influence other people. And again, I love to work with engineers that have a global perspective, not just a local perspective.
Thank you. Alan, can you tell us your story?
Yes, sure. Again, I hope that even if I'm not in the majority of the gender, my story can relate to the majority of the gender in the room, and hopefully also bring some tips or some ideas there. I must admit that before university, I was not a very good student. I was not very interested. I preferred to play football, and I preferred to go out and party. And I was very determined around these two topics. And I guess this is one of the first maybe tips. You have to be determined about what you want to do at the time you are doing it or you are preparing yourself to do it. So, but when I hit university, I realized that tech, and for me tech was mechanical engineering, or engineering in general, was something I really liked and wanted to do something with. So that's what I did. I did a mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering degree, and then from then on entered this industry in France. I'm French, by the way. Sorry about that. So my personal story, it's, again, I'm not a woman, but it's the same difference. I decided at a certain time in my career that I wanted to be different. I wanted to do something very different, which was to move into business. I was very modest, even poor at the time. I could not afford to go for an MBA. I wanted to do it internationally, more in an English-speaking country, because I could speak a few words of broken English. And being French, I decided for the UK, which you could think is a little bit of a challenge even before Brexit. So that's what I set out to do, and that's what I asked the companies I was interviewing with when I was interviewed. So, and I got that. I got that support from 3M. I've worked for 27 years now for 3M. So somebody out there took the risk to have somebody that wanted to do something very different, that expressed it very boldly, said what he thought he could do for that company, very modestly, maybe too modestly, and took the risk to give that person a job. That was 27 years ago. And I'm very pleased to be now one of the few managing directors driving the company in this part of the world. So maybe there is something in that story for everybody in the room, I hope.
So your advice is be clear about what you want to contribute and be bold in asking for the opportunity to do that.
It's been said much more eloquently than I can say it by many of the brilliant speakers in these last 2 days. It's about being bold. It's particularly true for women, being sure that, again, you don't hide behind the few things that you might not think would be fitting perfectly in the role that you're looking for, but that you go for it and take the risk to accept that you're not perfect and can still be in that role. I think it's also really expressing authentically, and that's been mentioned many times, how you think you can impact the company you want to go in. It doesn't have to be exactly on the role you're looking for, but what do you think you can bring to that company or to that group or to that role that you're looking at? And I'm sure we'll be discussing some of that later on.
We will. We will also be discussing the costs of failure. If you risk and fail as a woman, the costs are different than if you risk and fail as a man. But we'll get back to that. In the meantime, I would love to hear from our next speaker, Ms. Brigitta Finander from Ericsson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing me here. As a child, I was always very interested in science and mathematics. But actually, I didn't have any role models around me that were engineers. But since I was interested in mathematics, it came quite natural when I was applying them for university studies that I wanted to do a Master of Science. So I have a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering and Applied Physics with a lot of computer science. When I went to the university, I moved more to the computer science domain. And I didn't really know what to expect when I went out in my work life, so to say. And I applied for different jobs, and I got quite a few. And then I went to Ericsson, and I got a trainee, a position there for 2 years. We were 14 people starting at the same time. I was the single woman in the group. And the reason why I chose that job was just a gut feeling. This feels good. So I started there, and I have been my whole career in Ericsson. That's quite fantastic. That is not what you expect when you start. But being in such a big company, we're more than 100,000 people globally, there are so many opportunities, and you can do so many different things. So it does not feel that you have been in the same company. You have always been possible to move on and do new things. And I have done a lot of different things, both in Sweden, where I started, but also in other countries. And actually, a couple of years ago then, or 1.5 years ago, I got asked to take on a position here in Poland and head up our R&D center of 2,000 engineers that we have in Łódź and Krakow. And I said, no, I can't do that. And that was actually for family reason, because I had a son that has 1 year left before he was moved on to university studies. So I thought that I have to stay home and take that last year, and then I can go. And then I was talking to an old colleague, a female colleague, during the weekend, and she said, "You're stupid. You shouldn't say no. This is a great opportunity for you." So then I went back and said, may I consider it? And here I am. So this is how I moved into to Poland. And that was a really a good experience being here and learning a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, Emilia Burzyńska, can you explain to us how you got your start and what your advice to women in the room would be in how to get started in technology?
Let me start with the advice. The first thing what I would recommend is to understand which company you are applying for, what they are looking for, what are their values, what are the talents they are looking for. Second advice
How do you do that? How can I tell? How can I tell what a company is looking for?
Right, like leverage the networking and initiatives like this, talk to your colleagues, leverage the social media. There is plenty of information about the employers and available roles there. But second thing I would advise is then understand yourself. So understand what are your own expectations. And what I mean here is more about what is making you passionate, what is that driving you. And once you understand one and two, match the both. And let me share you an example. As P&G, what we are looking for in the talents, we are looking the people who has the potential to succeed in P&G. And
Sounds
for
pretty
that,
broad.
Yes, it sounds broad, but let me finish the story. So basically, the offering and the positions we are providing to the teams is consisting on the 2 dimensions. One, we are providing the roles that are building on your domain and technical domain and expertise, but also we are looking for people who solve problems and are able to work in the multinational teams. And here where my story is coming from. So I graduated the University of Technology in Krakow. So greetings to all of the AGH folks in the room. I finished the mastery, and that time I was similar like you. I was lacking the role models. I was basically not imagining myself to be focusing on the role that time, it was 12 years ago, that time I was imagining the technical role which is very narrowed. Because of my personal and family business, though I was exposed to sales. Therefore, I gave up my technical mastery at that time, although I have a lot of passion for, and decided to apply to sales P&G. And I was lucky because after going through the whole interviewing process, what I have been exposed, like the senior IT leader that time called me and said, you know what, we are looking for people who has both the potential in the technical domain, and this is what we are seeing from your CV, but also the people who really wants to work in the multinational team. And this is what we heard you are looking for. So we are providing you this opportunity. So I started leading the SAP implementation for the beginning for the Targówek plant in Warsaw, but later on my role evolved to regional and to global role.
So the advice that I'm getting from this first round of questions is, first of all, you have to know your stuff. You have to get the education first. You have to know the basics. Then you have to know whether you want to work in a small company or a really big one. And the difference in opportunity between a startup and a multinational company is vast. The experience you can have there is really different. So you have to know which kind of experience you're looking for. And now I want to move on to the second question, because let's say that you're in the door. In most of the tech world, if you are a woman on the team, you are going to very often find yourself the only woman in the room. I can't tell you how often I hear this from women in technology. They are constantly the only women in the room or the only women in the region. So this is an environment which in and of itself is uncomfortable. It's hard to be a minority. Sometimes it can be dangerous. It's difficult to work well, creatively, and be safe in an environment where you feel singled out and threatened. And I would really like my fantastic panelists to give you some advice on how to deal with this uncomfortable situation that you are bound to find yourself in at least a few times in your career in tech.
So first, I'd like to say that I like to think of it not just as survival skills, but as a leader in technology, my job is to make it so that other women and underrepresented people in technology can thrive and not just survive. And so, come and find me if you ever work with me. That I'm an ally for you. But I would say, first of all, find your tribe. And what I mean by this is, in any company, especially if you're in a very large company, there are a huge diversity of interests outside of the core of what you're doing as a team. And so you can always find people who share your interests, whether that's a sport or a game, or I think Google is so big you could probably even find a knitting circle. I don't know, I haven't checked. But there are ways to develop relationships with your colleagues, not just other women, but all of your colleagues on the basis of shared interests. And so I would say, whatever that shared interest is, find your tribe where you're working. The second thing is to actually develop a network of female peers and colleagues. And this is something that even if you're in a small company can be done ad hoc. You don't have to wait for a formal mentorship program to get started or a Lean In Circles program to get started. All you need to do is just find the other women and say, hey, let's have lunch once a month. And that's just a great way to have those allies and relationships built, even if they're not in the same team as you are. And then finally, I would say have an ally in leadership. So again, if you ever work with me, find me, I'm an ally. But you can also have male allies in leadership and develop a close relationship, somebody that you know that you can trust. If you ever run into difficulties, that you can go to them and they will help you advocate.
Can I ask you a follow-up question to that? I think that's
Sure.
really excellent advice. But I wonder, how do you go about befriending someone in leadership? It can be a little awkward. You don't want to be seen as you're sucking up. How do you actually build that rapport with somebody higher up?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you are a woman in technology, you're going to be surrounded by male leaders because you're going to maybe be in a room full of them all the time. So, you know, listen to the conversations that are happening, find something where you have a shared interest or, you know, in technology or you hear something interesting that that person says, and then just next time you run into them in the hallway, maybe strike up a conversation. I think a lot of these mentorship or sponsorship relationships really get started as casual conversations that happen around the office. And then, you know, if you get some engagement from the person, then you can say, hey, let's have coffee sometime or let's have lunch sometime.
Great, thank you. Alan, what would you add?
Well, first of all, I mean, I like your introduction. We mustn't hide from these realities because they are there. I mean, we have the pleasure with 3M to work also with the UN Global Compact on such issues. And we know that, for example, in Poland, we have a large influx of Ukrainian workers, women Ukrainian workers, often blue collars. And we know that there are many cases of harassment of all sorts and abuse of all sorts. So I think it's a little bit sometimes unfair only to put it on the incumbent, the entrant, to find his or her way into the company. We also have to work on this, and that's what I would like to maybe explore a little bit more during this question, if I may. But the first thing is, you know, first of all, and research, like my colleagues' input as well, research the company you're going in, whether it's a startup, a small family business in Poland, a mid-sized company in Czech Republic, or a large multinational. Research and understand the values. Do they fit with you? If you think they don't go. Don't go. Even if the job is very interesting, you are not losing, they are losing. These companies will disappear. They will move out of this world, for sure. Because our world is getting bigger, diversified. My customers are Czech, Ukrainians, they're Polish, they're electricians, they're dentists, they're nurses, they're global, local, international. You know, do you think we can just be, like the picture that was shown earlier on, white, aged, gray hair men to manage this? No. So if we don't realize as a company that we need this diversity, and not only in gender, and backgrounds in many other ways, we will not survive. So don't go for these companies. At the same time, and there's many of those in this event, and many of those in Poland or elsewhere, there are many companies that are very good companies that want to welcome diversity and that know how to manage diversity. So
Can I
go
ask
for
you a
these.
question about this? So are you saying that if I go in for an interview at a company where I feel that I would fit, I want to hang out with people like this, should I tell them that I think as a woman I can bring diversity that you're missing to the table?
It's always the case that you have to be careful what you bring in your first interview. But I think today, in many of the companies we're talking about or that we are engaging with as partners, customers, suppliers with my company, we see this becoming a non-issue, quite the contrary.
You're looking for women, aren't you?
Absolutely, we're looking for this. Actually, we are even measuring ourselves on how we do on this, because I know it's a little bit of a passé statement, but I strongly believe that what gets measured gets done. So that's important also to see and monitor how we do this. That's very important. But then there's the responsibility of the leadership team, or people in leadership position. And again, that was mentioned. I liked your term, an ally. I think it has to be even more than that. Certainly in my position, it has to be much more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's for me very important. And I could give you many examples, but one maybe that I want to state, and maybe you can research. Does the company you want to work with make it visible that they're engaging on that path? And by visible, I mean engages in formal project activities that are visible inside and outside around diversity and inclusion. And not just as makeup, as you mentioned, but with real data. There are ways. I mean, we participate in external measurement by our employees through Great Place to Work, for example. Diversity and inclusion is a major element of that. and it's the voice of the employees that you have in return. So you make it visible to yourself. You cannot hide behind just words. You have to put actions in place. That's certainly what we do. I, for example, wear this badge.
What does it say?
I'm In. I'm In is one of the main programs that we run on a worldwide basis around diversity and inclusion, making sure that we allow everybody, men and women, to tell their story in front of the others and participate. So
Okay, so how do we keep
that's
women
important.
safe?
By doing that, I think that makes them much safer, much safer.
What does? Wearing a button?
Not wearing a button, doing all the activities that are around that button, creating forums where women, men, people of very diverse background work on these topics together or express their authentic activities, goals, roles, ways to achieve them. I think this is very much around that, I think.
Great, thank you. Brigitte, what would you add about keeping women sane, creative, and safe inside tech environments where they are the minority?
Yes, I think networking is very important. You need to find your allies, and that's both males and females. And that is something you have to work consciously
Look
with.
for men wearing the button.
So, and then I think there is a lot of also choosing your manager. I think that is as important as choosing the content of the job. I have an experience, I have had many good managers. I have one experience where I had one that I didn't really like. I didn't see that I could agree with him, the direction he was moving. I didn't understand him, and I didn't really have the trust in him. And I realized I was sitting there too long. That's an experience I've learned. So I will never let me do that again. If I have a manager I don't trust, then I move on as quick as possible. So I think that is a clear recommendation. If you feel that you don't are aligned with your manager and you get the trust from him as you need or her, then you have to move on. And actually, I've had quite a few female managers as well, and those are probably the best ones I have had, I would say. So that is a very good experience as well. And in Ericsson, we are working a lot with a target that we want to have 30% women. We are a technology company, so this is a very challenging target.
Where are you now?
We are 23 all over in the company. So that is a challenging target. And I actually had a colleague that were approached and asked to apply for a job in the company. And the reason was that our CEO had seen the short list of the applicants, and it was there were no women in the list, in the short list. There were probably 2 or 3 names left. And then he said, come back to me, I want a list where you all have female candidates. And then it was the question she put back then, because that was a totally new area for her. So it was not obvious for her to apply for the job. And then she said, is this just to, make the numbers, or to secure that you want to have a female on the list? But she got the job, and she's doing very well. She has been there for a few months now. So there are good examples. But you have to work with it consciously in the company, that's for sure. It doesn't happen by itself.
I think it's very important to note the 30%, because in many ways, 30 is the new 50. There is research that shows that once you have a minority group that reaches 30% in the population, thanks to programs and outside support, once they hit 30%, they are able to self-sustain and grow without additional quotas or special programs. So it's very realistic, this 30%, and pay attention to this number. If you hear a company that you're applying to mention 30% as a goal, this means they have done their homework. They know what they're doing. Thank you for bringing that up. Emilia, what would you say is the best way for women to stay safe, creative, and sane in tech companies?
I think yesterday we heard from Maria Gabriela, if I remember correctly, like only, as you said, 1:20 ratio, and she was referring to 70% of the women are in in technical jobs. And as we all shared, many companies are living with the strategies around diversity and inclusion to build this safe environment, yet not many of them live it. I am coming from the second biggest IT hub in P&G. We have nearly 350 IT professionals, and we reach nearly 50% of gender split. And I like your comment just before my question, because I do agree that by reaching this number, it's a self-running machine. But what is the key ingredient to that? For me personally are the two things. One is that women can really grow and have the meaningful work plans. They feel safe, they can really develop. But second is the area of trust and the culture of trust, the culture of inclusion, that I can be listened, that everyone will hear my point of view, I can really share, I can speak up. Basically, what's also worth mentioning, I personally use a lot of mentoring, and I think, Alan, you referred to that pretty much, but I think this is the power that can be used without any formal programs, right? You can use the mentoring around you. I am personally a mentor and I'm a mentee. I have mentors from diverse backgrounds, both IT and business-wise. I also use, and this is what company also encourage us, is to use the reverse mentoring. Especially important when you are a manager of other. This helps you to get the continuous feedback as how are you getting as a manager, but also you can hear those cases or the situation from women, men, depending who the mentee is, and help them address those roadblocks or obstacles they can see in various situations. Because as you said, there are up and downs. So there is not always everything pleasure, but I think thanks to this culture of trust that people can really speak up, they can really share their opinions, this is one of the ingredients for success.
Okay, so we've got two, we're going to call them green flags that have come up out of this round. Make sure you're not alone in the company, even if you're alone in the room. So make sure there are allies, people both in management and in different departments that you can turn to if you have a problem. And the second thing I'm hearing, which is interesting, is trust. Now, trust isn't something that you can bring into a company. It's something that needs to be there. So I'm not quite sure how to go about measuring the culture of trust inside a company before you actually join them. But it seems, from what I'm hearing, that it's very important to gauge whether you can trust the people around you, and in particular, your boss, and if not, maybe move away towards a different role or even a different company. Thank you. Those are very practical insights. I'm going to skip question 3 because you have so much interesting things to say that I don't want to interfere, but we're lower on time than I expected. So now I want to talk about side doors. Now, there's a lot of bias in hiring and promoting women, which means that sometimes tackling the company you want to work for head on is not going to work. Sometimes it's easier to move into the tech sector from side doors and windows. There's a saying in Polish, if you can't enter through the door, go through the window. So, what are the best side doors for women to enter into tech? I've seen architects move to user experience design. I've seen women in education use technology to take over a whole field. The biggest learning app in the world is run by a woman in India. It's called Byju's. 25 million kids use it to learn. So education is one. Where else can women pivot into technology from? These don't have to be really long answers because I do have one more really important question to ask you.
Sure. So I think you heard a little bit about my journey, and I think I came a little bit through a side door via design into engineering. And I think you also see, especially in the sciences, there are a lot of people doing quantitative analysis, and they tend to make excellent data scientists. So that's a nice side door for people to come through. I think the ultimate side door, though, is to be an entrepreneur, to to see an unrecognized problem in society and decide that you're going to solve it and build your own company, I think that can be a fantastic side door into technology. And I would also say that having an adjacent skill is a superpower. So if
What
you,
does adjacent skill mean?
so if you're an engineer who understands design, or a designer who can write code, or a product manager who knows how to do research, these things are incredibly valuable. They don't make you narrow. They make you, more versatile within your organization. You can solve many different types of problems, not just the core problem in your core competency. And so it's really great to sometimes come in through a window and bring a different perspective and set of skills to your competency.
I've even heard, that's an excellent point. Do you know that people who win the Nobel Prize are more likely to win the Nobel Prize if they have a passion for the humanities? There are tables that say that if you are a magician or a juggler, your likelihood of winning the Nobel Prize as a scientist goes up by 23%. So these adjacent skills can really contribute to both your value for the company and your creativity. Alan, what would you say would be a good side door?
I would reinforce this message. I think certainly when you enter a company or when you enter a career, you tend to focus on what you've come from, you've learned, your basic skills or knowledge, know-how. But as you move into the company, I think, and if the company, and that's my case, is broad enough in terms of areas, environments, and opportunities, then it's more about this, and as you progress, it's more and more about these adjacent skills. And I think you heard Laurie Tempelis this morning from 3M, who was talking about heading a very large group of IT. Her background is anything but IT. But her journey was a very broad journey that has built bricks into a solid leadership capability that I think most companies are looking, whether you're into a tech environment or something else. And I think this is very important.
So
the
soft skills also
soft
matter.
skills, and the second point is willingness to learn. Willingness to take the risk to learn something which is out of your comfort zone, because this is what we're looking for as leaders of our companies. That's what we want to see. So if you have both, generally it can work.
Soft skills and willingness to learn. Thank you. Brigitte, what would you add?
Yes. I think there are many different things. I think the broad perspective is really important. And if you have some business end user understanding, all companies are selling products or services or something. And even though you are part of the tech part of the organization, you have to understand those perspectives. So that always helps. But I think it's also very much, the soft skills, understanding and listening to other people to get the knowledge and being used to learn quickly. And I think that is, if you do some university studies, you learn that in general what different subjects you study.
But is this a side door, you're saying? Or a window into tech?
I think it could be, definitely. I have seen in examples people coming from other domains. But of course, then you have to be open-minded and learn and trust people around you that you can get the knowledge from them.
Thank you. Emilia, what would you say would be a good side door in our part of the world to get into technology?
Coming back to my first thought of what was my story, I think we still live in the environment when people often believe that technical roles are limited to the really narrow technical domain. While yet we have 10% women at the University of Technology. So what I would advise, we encourage the women to really focus on and educating them on what is available. Because I think the limitations and the side doors need is coming from the fact that they were really lacking still the role modeling. Despite, this initiative is just a great example how you can showcase and bring some wisdom or the experiences to women, but still there is a lot of work to do.
Okay. So let's talk about an edge that we can give you. Because sometimes, and I heard this from Andra Kay, who is head of Silicon Valley Robotics. She's now one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley, and the way she got where she is today is she put her money on robotics back when nobody was thinking about robotics seriously. So she looked at what might be important in 20 years' time and became a specialist in it before it became important. So what would you advise? What do you think in your particular fields, what should these women specialize in today so that they can have an edge in the market in 5, 10, 20 years' time? What's coming?
So I'll give one caveat to my answer to this question, and that is, I don't know if you all saw on Twitter last week, there was this whole meme of if you want to be relevant as a software engineer in 10 years, you need to learn web components, GraphQL, and serverless architectures. And then a bunch of other people jumped onto that and started making fun of it by basically saying, oh, if I would have said this in 1990, I would have said this, and if it was in 1970, I would have said this, and how wrong those predictions would have been. So I think it is very hard to look 20 years into the future. That being said, if you look at where the large companies are kind of placing their bets, it's a few different areas like blockchain, machine learning and AI, augmented reality, mixed reality, and then Internet of Things, edge computing, that sort of autonomy. I think those are big areas. And in addition, quantum computing is an area of research right now that I think will emerge in the next 20 years. And so there are maybe a couple topics I find fascinating in these different areas. One is that when the quantum era arrives, most of our encryption algorithms are going to be breakable by brute force very easily, and so a pretty interesting area in academic research will be cryptography or the development of new encryption algorithms. And then I think cybersecurity on the professional side will continue to be a pretty big topic going forward as a result.
Because of the privacy concerns that are rising both in Europe and globally. Is that why?
Yeah, I mean, privacy and then just general data security. You want to be able to have financial transactions on the web or otherwise, and you want those to be secure. And then the other thing is, I think the intersection of machine learning and edge computing is pretty interesting. So
machine learning and what?
Edge computing, so like autonomous vehicles and other autonomous things in the Internet of Things. So I think you're going to see kind of two areas here. One is you're going to see enhanced silicon coming to the edge to support the machine learning that needs to happen not in data centers. We won't be able to rely on sending data back and then doing all the computation in a central place and then sending it back out to the edge. So you're going to see that computation happening on devices locally, but then also you're going to see the need for more compact deep learning algorithms to support that machine perception. So those are two areas I find pretty interesting, but who knows what'll happen in 20 years.
I'm not going to pretend to have understood all that, but I think they did. So thank you for being very specific.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Yeah, and I would say, like, wrapping it up, that the ability to learn is probably the most important skill you need to have to stay relevant, because things are going to change and we don't know what those directions are going to be, but if you're able to stay on top of trends and continuously learn as a technologist, that will help you.
What would be a source that you follow to figure out what needs to be learned now?
I tend to follow a lot of CTOs and technologists in areas of specialty that I'm interested on Twitter and other LinkedIn, other social media, and then kind of watch what they're saying and then follow the articles that they're posting.
That ties in very nicely with paying attention not only to the kind of company you want to work for, but the kind of boss you want to have. Sometimes if you follow people who you would love to work for on social media, you will notice that they're hiring and looking for someone like you quicker than if you follow their company page. So not only will you know what they're paying attention to, but also if they're looking for you. Thank you. Alan, what will be relevant for 3M in 5, 10, 20 years' time?
3M, so I will bring 3 points, if I may. We're a material science company. We're not so much a digital company yet, but we're a material science company. We have more than 46 technology platforms that, range from nanotechnologies to special materials to predictive engineering and modeling to abrasives, adhesives, electronics, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's a lot of space for STEMs and for women with strong backgrounds in STEMs in a company like 3M. And of course, as we look forward, all this needs to be more and more connected, all this needs to be more and more digital, and we need to figure out how we're going to make this for our customers. So this is one area that is big today, but will continue to be big. By the way, I have about 3,000 employees here in Poland. In R&D, 60% of them are women. So please continue to come to us. We need you. 40% in production are women, including module managers, supervisors. I've got 5 sites. 3 of the biggest sites are managed by ladies. So this is what we want, and this is what we have. A second point, I would say, which is very big for us and will be for many companies, is sustainability. So think about how you translate your skills, whatever they are, into a sustainability competitive advantage for the company you want to work with. I think that can be a major thing you can bring to companies. And the last one, I would say, which is a broader one, particularly as you will move into leadership positions, it's about people. It's about engaging people, employees, peers, your bosses, your executives, and this is very important, particularly as one thing will be absolutely certain in the coming years is that change will be there for companies and the way they interact with their customers, for our societies. So the ability to manage and lead people through change is probably one of the biggest skills you can have and bring to a company. So also think about that as you build yourself and your skills.
So management and leadership skills. Great, thank you. Brigitta, what would you add about the future?
Yeah, this is a hard question because it's very hard to predict, of course. But I mean, artificial intelligence, that is ongoing right now as we speak, and that will continue for many years, I believe. Then we are working a lot with the 5G and the rollout of 5G coming and IoT connected to that. And that will continue for many years as well as a competence that is needed. And 5G will address all kinds of industries. So it's not just in the telecom industry, it will affect all industries. So I think that is very, very relevant. And then, of course, security. I think that is that's going to be an issue that will just grow. So we need to be prepared for that in the software industry.
Thank you.
And then, of course, it's learning, that you be able to fast adapt and learn. I think that is the main thing, because you can't really predict.
Thank you. Emilia?
I think we are living in the fast-changing environment. So keeping and be updated, keep developing yourself, building on your competencies is something very crucial. I think Sarah shared a lot on the IT path. What I could only share is that focus on the things that really makes you, again, passionate and you feel very strong of. Keep developing them. Keep on the edge of this path stream. But also, when you feel I think I am there, this is exactly the time when you need to start thinking what's next. So supporting to what Alan said as well, I think looking at this interdisciplinary skills as well is quite important, because no matter whether you are an expert in this particular key domain, it potentially you will need to develop this to the broader audience, to the various consumer groups or the users. So understanding the sustainability, understanding how to influence and make them user-friendly. So all the aspects of different soft skills are also important, but keep investing in yourself. This is, of course, many companies will help you those. So in my particular case, we have the platform called Ignite, keeps me updated. So I'm there at least twice per week. But this is your responsibility. It's your career, and you will know the most what is needed for you to succeed.
Awesome. So here we are. That's the end of my questions. I have a lot of questions from the audience. I wish I could ask them all, but I'm only going to focus on one or two as the clock is mercilessly ticking. I think they've sped it up, especially for this panel. One question from Justyna Wierzbicka, and any one of you can answer this. Hi, I wanted to ask if you could tell us how to speak to narrow-minded people about female roles in technology. And this is a very important question, because what we tend to do is we have these conferences where women come and other women talk to them, and we build these ghettos. We build these ghettos where we preach to the converted. Meanwhile, there's all these people around us, especially in tech and in business. They're the ones who should be getting the message. How do we talk to them like we talk to each other? Emilia has an idea.
Yeah, I think we are living in a vast changing environment, and companies do realize that in order to sustain, they need to innovate. And what we heard over the past days, I think from many of the panelists, they were sharing that diverse team creates better results. This is the fact. All of the statistics just show them. So smart companies invest in diversity. So they need to have the both brain powers. So why to eliminate?
Is this the answer how to talk to people about it, though?
Pardon?
Like, what argument do you use? Do you tell them diversity makes innovation happen faster? Do you put specific data on the table? How do you actually start those conversations with people who aren't seeing what you're seeing?
I would keep focusing on the power of driving the better results through innovation and through having those different experiences, different backgrounds, different skills. I am personally one of the 7 children of my mother, and basically we were living in diversity around us. So nothing is stopping you. You can really make a lot of things, and the company that really drives this as a value will help you to achieve all the results.
Any other ideas how to talk to people who are narrow-minded about diversity?
I think one thing is to bring facts to the table. You can refer to that. But I think also you need to have some concrete examples, to take examples from your own life, so to say, what you have seen and so on.
So provide proof.
Provide proof. So I use that quite a lot in my daily work when I talk to people. Whatever, when I want to do a change, that I refer to some concrete things that I've seen or what I've been part of.
I have a second question here from Olga Kurek to all panelists. I'd like to ask for advice for a young mother of a daughter. Our panelists spoke about their passion for mathematics as children. Is that something you were born with, or did somebody show you the world of STEM from early childhood? If so, in what way? So this is how to raise the next generation.
So I think for me, my dad was also very passionate about math, and so maybe I sort of picked up on his enthusiasm and then, excitement when I started learning as well. So I think just showing your own passion for math and science topics can really help the next generation embrace it. But then I also think it's, also on the community, and so this is something I've been very passionate about, is trying to expose the next generation, give them maybe what I felt I was lacking growing up in terms of exposure to computer science. And so there are great programs like, I don't know if you've heard of the Technovation Challenge, but it's a global competition where girls form teams and build apps and business plans, and then they're able to pitch those for a chance to win $10,000 to start a company. And this is for middle school through high school girls. So that's been one forum where I've been active, and there are many similar programs worldwide where I think we as leaders in technology need to help bring the next generation in as well.
Brigitte, you're going to be the last speaker because we are in the red.
Yeah. I just want to add one thing. I think math is very much about self-confidence, and that is what you give to your child. Give to the child that I trust you, you're gonna manage, you're excellent in math, because it's so much self-confidence.
Thank you very much to all my panelists, and good luck to everyone in the audience. If you need more specific advice, please find our panelists afterwards here during the rest of today. Thank you.
Thank you.